Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you hated Megalopolis, you're gonna love this video. If you loved Megalopolis, you'll probably also like this video. And if Megalopolis just kind of confused you, stick around. You know when you finally get around to reading that one book by that one philosopher, and you're reading it, and it's kind of confusing. Sometimes it's like really simple and straightforward. But more or less, you're getting some pretty good life advice, and just when you're about to recommend it to a friend, you turn the page and the next chapter is called something like On the Issue of Women. That's kind of what being a fan of Megalopolis is like. But here's the thing. When you are reading Aristotle, and he says something like, a proper wife should be as obedient as a slave. The female is a female by virtue of a certain lack of qualities, a natural defectiveness. When Aristotle says that, he's really trying to make an objective statement about reality. Megalopolis, on the other hand, tries its hardest to leave every inch of itself open to interpretation, which makes it hard to pin down exactly when the movie is really trying to make you think or feel any specific thing. But here's the thing. I'm sure that when a lot of people saw Megalopolis for the first time, they got an icky feeling from the way that it chooses to portray and treat its female characters. Plot-wise, their goals and opinions seem to come secondary to the men's, while Platinum's character is constantly sexualized and then killed. And then right in the middle, there's this whole like show with these girls singing about how great it is to keep their virginity.
And then I found it, the missing key, right there inside me, God's purity.
So I don't blame anyone who got that icky feeling. I got that icky feeling too. But nothing in Megalopolis is what it appears to be on the surface. And the way that Megalopolis handles its themes of misogyny is actually very complex. And it has some cool stuff to say. And it has some less cool stuff to say as well. They're much more complicated than we originally might have given them credit for. And I'm not going to make the argument that they are so complicated that we should let Francis Ford Coppola off the hook. But I am saying that they're so complicated that it's going to take at least the rest of this video to explain. Before we get into the meat of misogyny that's present in Megalopolis, there's some real life misogyny that I need to at least make known. While making Megalopolis, there were some allegations made against Francis Ford Coppola, which had to do with some inappropriate behavior on his part towards some of the actresses. I don't want to do a quick summary of them because I might leave something important out, so I just left some of the major sources on these stories in the description, and I would highly recommend checking those out before you continue this video. So pause this video and then go check out those. Okay, you back? Yikes, right? Whoa, wow. Ugh. Not a good look, not a good start. This video is going to be touching on some controversial topics, and I've tried my best to include what I thought was relevant to analyzing specifically Megalopolis, but please feel free to let me know what you think I missed. My goal with this video is just to get a discussion going, and nothing that I say should be seen as like the final word on this topic. That is not what I'm expecting, and it's not my goal. I want to hear what everyone else thinks of this. All right. Let's do it. So I was hoping that I would be able to wait a little longer before I was forced to do this, but as I was getting into why the women in Megalopolis are treated the way that they are, I realized that I would actually need to do some research on ancient Rome. It was bound to happen at some point. I thought I would be able to postpone it more. So many of the characters and plot points are inspired by certain people and events that occurred leading up to and during the Catilinarian conspiracy, which played a major role in the fall of the Roman Republic and the birth of the Roman Empire. I'll probably do a video more in depth on that at some point, but I'm an amateur at this kind of analysis at best, so that'll take a while and it'll be much further down the road. All that we really need to take from that for now is the fact that Megalopolis uses a lot of cultural references from the time period of the late Roman Republic. From that, we can learn a lot about why the women are portrayed the way that they are. I'm not even remotely an expert historian, so take everything that I say with a grain of salt. I've left my sources for this video in the description, if anyone wants to check, and feel free to correct me or tell me what I've missed. So the Catilinarian conspiracy occurred at a time when many patriarchal ideals in Rome had begun to fade away. This came after a period of deeply patriarchal values in which women were essentially the property of their fathers until they were married, at which point they would become the property of their husbands. They could not own property, they could not seek personal justice under the law, and if their husband suspected that they had committed adultery, the husband would be allowed to just kill his wife. Straight up. A senator of the time named Cato, unrelated to the Catilinarian conspiracy, other guy, he said that if you catch your wife in an act of infidelity, you would kill her with impunity without trial. But if she were to catch you, she would not venture to touch you with a finger, and indeed she has no right. Despite the second-class legal conditions that the women of Rome endured, historians still maintain that they were well loved and respected. They could go to parties and festivals. Sexual harassment was illegal, which is a big deal for such an ancient time. And they could go to see plays and circuses with the permission of their husbands. While some historians still maintain that the women of that time were well loved and respected, the women of that time might have felt differently. And we can guess that because they began to find loopholes in the law. If they remained outside of marriage and continued to live solely under their father's control, which was called patria potestat, then they could still have control over their properties and finances. Up until this point, marriage in the Roman Republic had been about both the law and religion. But as more and more women continued to decide against getting married as a way to maintain their own rights, the legal significance of marriage was dropped in order to incentivize, the religious kind of marriage. At that point, women had nearly gained just as much freedom and dignity under the law as men. Marcus Tullius Cicero, that name ring a bell? Complained that the lawyers had found ways and means whereby women no longer depended upon their guardians, but their guardians upon them. Okay, so the legal significance of marriage is dropped, which basically means that a woman could get married and still have ownership of her own properties. They would not be transferred to her husband. At that point, an even better loophole was found. Women realized that they could take their property, enter into a marriage to remove themselves from control of their fathers, and then divorce their husbands to gain almost full control of their own properties. Now this was big. While a woman's social class was still largely dependent on who she partnered with, legally and financially they were more independent than ever. At that point in Roman history, women had finally been granted an amount of freedom and power that they had not had for centuries, even though they still lived in a mostly culturally patriarchal society. The result was a new generation of women taking their freedom and using it for all it was worth. Many historians say that this is one of the factors that led to the instability in traditional values, which caused the fall of the Roman Republic and the birth of the Roman Empire. Alright, that's enough history for now. Let's get to Megalopolis. Something to keep in mind throughout this examination of Megalopolis's female characters is the fact that Megalopolis is mostly a portrayal of an upper-class family, as in like the richest of the rich.
Your folks are the richest grandkids, the notorious Claudettes. Claudia, Claudine, and Claudette, along with their tag-along brother, Claude Crassus Pulcher.
Almost everyone is either a cousin or sibling or uncle or aunt. This reflects the familial structures of many powerful families in ancient Rome, as well as some of those families today. I think that this comparison that Megalopolis draws is a nice subtle dig at how, while those in power might say that they're in favor of traditional family structures, they rarely comply to them themselves. They want traditional family structures for us, I also bring this up because the way that women are portrayed in Megalopolis has more to do with the way that women in the upper classes of society supposedly behave, rather than the general population. There is, of course, one woman in Megalopolis who is an outsider from the lower classes, and we will get to her later. I thought that a good way to do this video would be to address how each female character is individually characterized, and just assess how fleshed out each of them are. How they're treated by the plot, how they're treated by other characters, how they add to the themes of Megalopolis, that kind of thing. You know, how much thought did Coppola put into these female characters as individuals? Okay, so let's start with the least prominent female characters and work our way towards the ones that are more featured. Caesar's wife, Sunny Hope Catalina. She isn't really a character in the movie, but she plays a large part in the plot and Caesar's motivations. We know that while she was still alive, she and Caesar had been trying to have children.
Why didn't you and Sonny have children?
We were trying.
When Sunny learned that she had successfully become pregnant, she called Caesar home to tell him the good news, but then she saw a smudge of another girl's lipstick on something of his, and she confronts him, and we get this dialogue.
You found me.
I have good news.
What's that? What's your good
No
news?
cigarettes, Caesar. Why is there lipstick on the cigarettes?
Are you really asking me why
Who's
there
been in our
lipstick?
home again?
I was at home and not on a
Why do
jury
you do
stand.
this? Why do you do this? You use that
Why do I do
great
what?
brain of yours and you manipulate.
Why do I use my
and you
great brain to
shift
find a
and
bunch
you
of
try to
logical
make me
things as
feel
opposed
like
to
I'm the
hypothetical
crazy
situations?
one, but I'm not
I'm
the
not trying to
crazy
tell
one
you
here.
you're crazy, but
You
you're
are,
trying to...
you are.
How are you not trying to tell me that I'm crazy?
This is one of Caesar's lowest moments. It might be Caesar's lowest moment. It happens off screen. It happens before the movie. We get little hints of it. This is the most specific evidence that we get of exactly what happened. But really, this moment fleshes out how much Caesar sucks. Unfortunately, though, the movie chooses to focus more on Caesar's regret than Sunny's suffering. After learning about Caesar's infidelity, she drives away in a jealous rage and flies right off of a bridge into a body of water, where she dies with 2 twins still in her belly. Caesar says that as he tried to save her life, he discovered the principle of Megalon.
She came home with good news, but saw something that enraged her jealousy. I followed, but I saw her drive over the bridge and into the icy water. And in that madness, it came to me. I discovered the principle of Megalon, trying to save her life.
Whatever the hell that means. Sunny Hope's mysterious death is also the center of Mayor Cicero's past beef with Caesar.
Were you so cool and collected when you poisoned your wife and her body disappeared? Is Megalon your miracle method made from her body? What really happened?
Well, you were the prosecuting DA, so you know I was acquitted.
I think that it's interesting that Caesar would rather let rumors of him murdering his wife spread rather than admit that he was unfaithful to her. It's almost like he likes the allegations of him murdering his wife more than infidelity because he thinks that they play better in the public eye.
Why do you pretend you're so bad?
Well, if you pretend to be good, the world won't take you seriously. But if you pretend to be bad...
It seems like a bit of a disrespectful way to treat his wife's memory, especially since he seems like he's meant to really love her. Sunny's ghost appears occasionally. We see that Caesar still visits her in a private room in a guarded hotel where she lays motionless. Later, after Caesar is shot in the head, we see Sunny's ghost visit Caesar and tell him to be with Julia.
Be with her.
Which is like, okay. I guess she's forgiven him for everything, which makes sense in like a spiritual way. Like, you don't want to just be a ghost that still has beef with someone on Earth forever, right? Like, at some point as a ghost, you should probably forgive so you can move on. But thematically, it sort of just serves as a way for Caesar to forgive himself for what he did to her, which is also, you know, valid in its own way. But at this point, I just want to point out that we should notice that in order to talk about Sonny's characterization, I mostly have to talk about Caesar's arc. She's more of a plot device than an actual character. She's like any other dead wife that exists to be trauma for the main guy. My mom used to always complain about how in old Disney movies, the wives and mothers were always dead before the movie started. My mom actually passed away a few months ago, which I think is a pretty glaring flaw in her argument. But before the credits roll, Francis Ford Coppola dedicates Megalopolis to his late wife, Eleanor Coppola, who had passed away a month before the movie's release. I don't know anything about their relationship. I think it's likely that she and Coppola worked together on the 40-year development of Megalopolis. I think it's likely that Caesar's various relationships throughout the movie reflect part of Coppola's real-life relationships. I can't really say any more than that without getting into pure conjecture. If anyone knows a good, thorough history of Coppola's past relationships, drop them in the comments. Sunny Hope is, I think, the weakest female character in the movie, which is a shame because she's kind of central. But at the same time, you can kind of see why she isn't more developed. I mean, she's dead. So next up is Caesar's mother, Constance Crassus Catalina. She's like if Livia Soprano was honest about Tony's dad.
Johnny was a saint.
And a beautiful standing rose. You gonna backtalk me now? Junior, get away. Oh, wait, please, what are you gonna do?
Johnny was a saint.
Without that girl's love, you're gonna be a has-been and a fake. Like your father.
The big difference, though, is that when Constance complains that Caesar is a bad son, she might actually have a point.
You know, when you got that Nobel Prize, why didn't you mention my name? You could have gotten up and you could have said, "To my mother."
I was very sick.
You could have said.
I forgot.
We really only get 2 scenes with her, and she basically uses both appearances to roast Caesar. This might just be a thing with Italian filmmakers where they just write mothers to be terrible. Not you, Scorsese. Your mom's a cutie.
Why don't you get yourself a nice girl?
I get a nice one almost every night, Ma.
Yeah, but get yourself a girl so you could settle down. That's what I mean.
settle down almost every night, but then in the morning I'm free. I love you. I want to be with you.
I would love to say that it's left open to interpretation of whether Caesar or his mother is the real problem in their relationship. But it's made clear that she's the problem when Caesar goes to kiss her and she accuses him of hurting her.
Ah, that hurt. He hurt me. You hurt me.
I was kissing you, Mother.
Later in the movie, we briefly see her mourning Caesar's death, and then she makes a very quick appearance at the end to support Caesar in his opening of Megalopolis.
Mother?
Constance is pretty inconsequential as a character. Again, she's mostly there to inform us about Caesar's character. More specifically, she's there to tell us why Caesar is so messed up. I think that the most interesting thing that she does is introduce string theory into the movie and explain that there are 11 dimensions.
Do you know that there is string theory? Do you know what that means? That there are 11 dimensions. It hasn't been proven yet, but that's what they think. It's sort of strings, you know? Isn't that interesting?
That aspect of the movie is a whole other can of worms for another video, though. Next up is Teresa Cicero, Mayor Cicero's wife. Now we're starting to get into the really thematically interesting female characters. For most of the movie, Teresa just sort of sits by Mayor Cicero's side. She just watches things as they unfold.
Hold up, sir. What? You gonna stop the mayor's parade? You gotta be fucking kidding me. This man is the bane of my existence. I want him out of my life.
Yes. He actually made sure I was here on time.
He dropped you off?
And at first glance, she might seem like a pretty unimportant character, but nothing in Megalopolis is what it seems to be at first. If we were making a spectrum to measure how well each of these characters are written, I think that Teresa would sit right in the middle. And that's not because she's a boring character. It's actually because she has moments in both extremes. And by extremes, I mean that she literally has the worst line in the entire movie. When everyone is at the Colosseum, she and Cicero are watching Julia as she follows Caesar through his drinking and pill snorting. We get this exchange.
Are they together?
No.
And with that womanizer?
Womanizer, that's an awful word. As if the woman had nothing to do with it.
I swear, directors always give Catherine Hunter the weirdest lines. Like, remember in Poor Things, where she tells Emma Stone that you should have sex that hurts because it will teach you about life.
But more than that, we must experience everything, not just the good, but degradation, horror, sadness. This makes us whole, Bella. Now, go and fuck someone and bring me 10 francs.
And then the rest of the movie is like, yes, this is true.
I want that.
So the question, right, is whether or not this movie agrees with what Catherine is saying or not. Yes and no. As far as the movie is concerned, Caesar's womanizing does depend on which woman he's dealing with. When it comes to Julia, he's not interested in her romantically until she shows that she can help him gain his control of time back.
For Julia.
Just try.
Hear me, time stop now.
Without getting too much into the actual meaning of Caesar's ability to control time, I'd say that in this instance, it represents his sense of self, or self-control, something like that. So yeah, he is interested in Julia because she makes himself understand himself better. I would call that love, not womanizing. However, when it comes to WoW Platinum, he treats her like nothing. He goes to her for sex, and that's it.
Caesar. 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 I love you. I love you with all my heart. Really, I do.
Never marry for love.
WoW is an overtly sexual character.
I'm rotten, and that is the score. Come for me on the trading room floor every weekday at 9 a.m. Mwah.
So it would seem like he is a womanizer with her because that's how she presents herself. In this sense, the movie does agree with Teresa on that a man becomes a womanizer depending on how a woman behaves, really quickly, just in case it needs to be said. But whether or not you agree with this assessment of male behavior, the issue with this sort of statement is that how a woman chooses to present herself doesn't really change the fact that she's still a human being and deserves to be treated that way. What did Logan Paul say? He was like, not to be a woke asshole or anything.
I don't want to come across like a woke asshole, but like, dude, women have it hard.
Okay, continuing with Teresa's characterization. After Julia and Caesar share their first kiss, we get this interaction between Teresa and Mayor Cicero.
Dream?
The omens are bad, my love. I was looking at the full moon when a cloud that looked like a hand grabbed it.
Only those in a nightmare are capable of praising the moonlight.
See, the issue is that Teresa's character seems to have so much authority over the morals of this movie, and that makes it hard to not take her womanizer comment just on the nose as what the movie believes. But here's the other side of the argument. It seems like here her character is being used to acknowledge the danger of Caesar's character. Like I mentioned before, Teresa is an observer. She sits by Cicero's side and teaches him how to have peace and understanding in any given moment, like with the moon comment. Later in the movie, Julia and Caesar invite Teresa and Cicero over for a hang. While they play cards, Caesar and Cicero start debating.
Utopias offer no ready-made solutions.
Well, they're not meant to offer solutions. They're meant to ask the right questions.
Yes, but utopias turn into dystopias.
Teresa attempts several times to get them to stop.
Wasn't it human friendliness that stimulated our brains by learning and enabled us to outcompete all other species on Earth?
Oh dear, blah, blah, blah.
She subtly maintains her loyalty to Cicero by mostly disagreeing with Caesar. One of Teresa's main goals throughout the movie seems to be helping Julia gain some autonomy in Cicero's eyes, which seems nice, but I think that she has secret motives. Check this out. During this conversation, she celebrates Julia's input to the conversation more than either of the boys.
The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, Julia, there is no one like you.
And then uses it as an opportunity to change the conversation.
Having such beautiful things in your home. And I understand it can expand as needed.
Oh, yes.
She keeps the peace between Caesar and Cicero and supports Julia.
In or out? Are we playing cards or reinventing history?
Later on, when Claudio's mob takes over New Rome and forces Cicero, Julia, and Teresa to run away, Julia makes her final plea to Cicero to respect her enough to trust her decision to marry Caesar.
Trust us. Trust me, Daddy.
Teresa is shown to be deeply invested in the conversation without actually taking part. Why? Here's the thing. I don't think that Teresa's support of Julia is just her being a girl's girl. I think that her support of Julia and her attempts to get Cicero to respect Julia's autonomy is really a politically strategic move to get Cicero to accept the shifts of power that are taking place. During their conversation over cards, Teresa tries to keep the peace because she understands that power is flowing in Caesar's direction, and an alliance between their two families would not be the worst thing. This is the double-edged sword of Teresa's character. She simultaneously supports Julia and Julia's autonomy, while still thinking of marriage as being a political arrangement. With this understanding of Teresa, the womanizer comment becomes even more complicated, because Teresa is technically saying it in order to reaffirm Julia's autonomy in Cicero's eyes, in order to leverage his love for her and assure that their family remains in a favorable position in the new world that Teresa knows is coming. Teresa's final act in the film is leveraging Cicero's love for her and getting him to join her on the literal road to Megalopolis.
Darling.
Teresa is a great representation of how older generations of women in the late Roman Republic might have acted. While the subjugation of women through marriage had ended, the cultural and interpersonal significance of marriage was still powerful enough to have great influence over political alliances. Her position as a simple observer who avoids confrontation in order to keep peace also suggests that she grew up in a time where women were used to being seen and not heard. And her womanizer comment is old-fashioned because she is old-fashioned. While this may have been the way that older generations of the time might have behaved, the new generation of upper-class women in Rome may not have had as much respect for the old values and customs. For obvious reasons, enter Clodia Pulcher. She is Julia's cousin and Claudio's sister. I think that Clodia is mostly used to characterize the new kind of culture and values that are present in the upper classes of New Rome.
The great ladies of Rome obsessed over fashion while having intimate dealings with the scum of the gladiatorial shows, poisoners, and blackmailers.
In real life, there was a woman who was called Clodia Pulcher, but I think that she has more in common with WoW Platinum. I know it's inevitable, but I really don't want to do a video comparing the Catalinarian conspiracy to Megalopolis. That time in Rome is a soup of different personalities, and Megalopolis is also pure chaos, and comparing and contrasting them would make me want to explode my head, I think. In the movie, we first see Clodia partying with Julia. And that's basically what she keeps doing for the rest of the movie. This largely reflects what a lot of women in the upper classes of Rome chose to do. With their newfound freedom from patriarchal control, there was no reason for them to do anything but enjoy themselves. Clodia bounces from thing to thing throughout Megalopolis without having much of any real personal goals or convictions. We never get any insight into why she does anything other than for fun. During the public debate that happens early on in the film, we see Clodia cheering for Claudio's support for Mayor Cicero's plans.
A fun casino. The latest in electronic gaming. It's really neat when you run concrete. Oh, come on. No.
But she also claps for Caesar's weird performance. She's really just looking for entertainment. If we speak about Clodia in terms of the hero's journey, then she represents Julia's ordinary world. Also notice how she's getting a pedicure in the middle of this very high-class fashion show. Never forget that all of these characters are part of the upper class, and that plays a big part in how they act. At no point are any of these characters' actions guided by necessity or principle. Everything that they do is guided by boredom, a desire for power, or delusions of grandeur. They were all born the richest of the rich. Almost all. We get a little more understanding of how this rich family thinks later on when WoW and Crassus are celebrating their marriage at the Colosseum.
How did you get the name WoW Platinum? Is it Greek?
I picked it up at Penn Station on my way to an employment agency.
Oh. The mocking tone in Claudia's question there tells you everything you need to know. They see WoW as lesser than them because WoW had to marry Crassus in order to achieve the same amount of wealth and class that this family has. Now, I'm an amateur with this kind of history, and I only briefly researched this, so tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to guess that the Greek comment has something to do with ancient Greece being poorer than ancient Rome. Let me know if I got that wrong in the comments. Later on in the Colosseum, while Vesta Sweetwater is singing about how great it is to be a virgin, and everyone is celebrating along with her, we will get to that, Clodia and her siblings go mime some very sexual acts.
Vesta Sweetwater!
Okay, go here. Grab that and go in front of you.
Joined with her is helping our city 10, 12, 20.
It's already been established that she and her siblings are having sex.
They're richest kids in the world, and rumor has it they're sleeping with each other too.
And it makes sense since they're all just rich pleasure junkies. Maybe it's a bad thing to maybe it's not a great way to phrase it, that it makes sense that she's having sex with her siblings. It makes sense for them. It makes sense for their it doesn't make sense in general. It makes sense for their characters because they are rich pleasure junkies with no values or respect for fucking anything. This moment specifically shows how little they care about old traditions and values in New Rome, even when they're the same traditions that brought them their wealth in the first place. More on that later. After Claudio leaks Caesar's and Vesta's sex tape, the Colosseum erupts into chaos. We briefly see Clodia cheering.
Your sordid life is marked with every sort of scandalous plot.
The only reason I can think that she would celebrate all of this is that, again, she's just looking for some entertainment. We know that she's not specifically happy that Vesta's reputation is ruined, because soon after, she goes to help Julia clear Caesar's name by investigating Vesta's past.
Bingo. Vesta.
Oh my god. She wasn't even born here. She was born in Indonesia. Huh. She came here when she was 6. Lying little slut.
That's a crazy line, right? Okay, but here's the thing. Calling Vesta a slut because she lied in order to appear underage is wild. But it's also kind of a poignant observation about why rich old men are so ready to give money in honor of young girls keeping their virginity. It's because they're pervs. So maybe Clodia isn't as clueless about the systems of power that are in place as we thought. I mean, she's still placing the blame on Vesta by calling Vesta a slut, rather than recognizing who actually has the money and power in this whole scenario. But it's a start, because like the thing is, Clodia is not completely clueless. Later on in the movie, when Claudio is beginning to gain more and more influence as a politician, Clodia delivers this line.
High on news! He has no boundaries, and that's how you get into that makes a political leader. A little crazy, no boundaries, and he's an entertainer.
Now that's a pretty funny line, and Chloe Feynman's delivery is just great. And it might seem at first like a pretty uneducated way of looking at politics, but I mean, you know? And if Clodia knows about anything, then it's about the power of entertainment, because that's her entire focus. We don't see much of her for the rest of the movie until Megalopolis is opened, and we briefly see her in the crowd cheering for Julia's success. I think that for the short amount of time that she's on screen, and the fact that she's just meant to represent a certain lifestyle, Clodia is surprisingly fleshed out as an individual character. Her own personal values are not particularly feminist, but she clearly does still benefit from the sort of liberating cultural shifts that I talked about earlier. Someone who has a bit more trouble benefiting from these liberating cultural shifts is Vesta Sweetwater. She pulls it off in the end, but it's a little tricky for a while. Vesta Sweetwater is a pretty clear stand-in for modern female pop stars. I think the most obvious comparison is Taylor Swift. When Vesta first pulls up to the Colosseum, she is greeted by the cheers of a mob of teenage girls. She says, "I can never get used to this." which implies that despite an extended period of fame, she still feels like a normal person and is genuinely grateful for her success. Very good, quick, efficient characterization. Her place thematically in the story is established with just as much efficiency in the next scene. She is presented by Caesar.
Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, Vesta Sweetwater.
Is it true, Vesta? Is your dress made of megalon?
Yes, the first one ever, designed by Caesar Catalina, just for little old me.
Vesta, over here!
Who has given her a dress made entirely out of megalon, which lets her be invisible. And then we get this line.
I'm invisible!
And then we get these rapid cuts between imagery that clearly symbolizes female chastity. A really quick analysis of this sequence is easy. Vesta Sweetwater's individuality is literally invisible because she represents New Rome's values of female virginity, which to the public within the movie represents a healthy society. And Caesar is complacent because he just cares about showing off the megalon. I know that I said that we were done with Roman history, but there's just a little more that we need to understand what the heck is going on here. In ancient Rome, Vestal virgins were basically government employees. They weren't really, but they held very high and influential offices. They were taken in by the priestesses of Vesta at a young age and were given the job of keeping the Vesta sacred hearth lit. The sacred hearth was a flame that was meant to burn forever in honor of Vesta, the goddess protector of the home and family. This is where Vesta's performance and the QR code bidding scene comes in. But you might be wondering, where in the scene is the eternal flame? Well, the flame for New Rome is money. I think that a lot of us, the first time that we watched this scene, me included, we thought that these old guys were all bidding for the chance to be the first to sleep with one of these virgins. But if we are speaking in terms of ancient Rome, which Coppola definitely is, then they are not trying to sleep with the Vestal virgins. Doing that was one of the worst things you could do in ancient Rome. People were executed for it. In truth, all these old guys are donating money to Crassus's federal bank in honor of the Vestal virgins, in order to keep New Rome strong, in the exact same way that the ancient sacred fire of Vesta was meant to keep ancient Rome strong.
Remember her pledge to marry as a virgin. That is money to the city. And your pledge, joined with her, is helping our city.
So, does the movie agree that this is a good way to keep society healthy? Does the movie think that we should idolize women who keep their virginity and shame those who don't? Okay, really quickly, I just want to make sure there's no ambiguity here. I'm asking these questions as a way to analyze what Megalopolis specifically is trying to say. I'm not asking these as like real moral questions. Women should be allowed to do whatever they want, period. When analyzing Megalopolis, though, we need to ask, what is it saying? Okay, so different characters seem to have their own takes on the whole Vesta Virgin thing. It's kind of fun. Mayor Cicero loves it.
A vision of virginal.
She took the pure love pledge.
Julia scoffs at it.
She took the pure love pledge.
Which of you?
Wow Platinum seems a little ashamed by it in the background. My favorite, Caesar's mom, who hates Caesar and wishes he was never born.
I think maybe alligators have the right idea.
What's that?
They eat their young.
She looks at these virgins like it's such a beautiful thing to not have sex or babies.
And give generous to
which is really funny. While Vesta Sweetwater sings this song and people are donating to her, we see that the main group of wealthy brothers and sisters are all humping and miming these sexual acts in the background. Nobody cares. Even though these are the actual people who make the decisions for society, nobody expects them to be virgins. And then a sex tape is leaked of Vesta Sweetwater with Caesar, and all hell breaks loose. Also, I've watched this movie a ton of times, but I've never been able to convince myself that this is Caesar or Vesta Sweetwater. This is not what they look like. I think that with the QR codes, the childish behavior of the donators, and the scoff from Julia, it's pretty safe to say that the movie is not pro-Vesta Virgin. At the very least, it's definitely using the Vesta metaphor as a way to point out the hypocrisies about how the public views sexual acts of figureheads versus those who actually run the world. Now, while I was researching this, I learned that there is an urban legend about how the original founding fathers of America had planned to have their own temple of Vesta under the US Capitol, and that a Vesta Virgin would be hired as a federal employee to keep an eternal flame burning at its center for the exact same reason as in ancient Rome. The accounts for how accurate that story is vary. I left my source in the description of this video, but yeah, that rumor is probably at least what inspired Coppola a little bit to make this connection, because the truth is that the founding fathers of America were pretty obsessed with ancient Rome. Anyway, after Vesta's performance, she shows her dress again and shouts, "You can see right through me."
Purity, it's no promise, it's no swear. You can see right through me!
It's very on-the-nose symbolism of what we were talking about before, of how it's easy for everyone to overlook Vesta's individuality because of what she represents to them. Right after that, the sex tape leaks, and everyone goes nuts because Vesta's virginity represents the sanctity of New Rome, and now that's gone. She is rushed out of the Colosseum. Claudio wanted to take Caesar down with the sex tape, but he didn't think of Vesta for a second because she's invisible. Julia goes to find Vesta's papers, not because she's interested in Vesta, but because she wants to save Caesar, because Vesta is invisible. Nobody at any point in this movie respects or takes Vesta seriously because she's invisible. After Julia brings Vesta's papers to Crassus, Caesar's name is cleared, and we get the craziest sequence in film history.
Forensic examination of the photos of sexual acts revealed that they were doctored and not authentic.
No matter how many times I watch Megalopolis, this part kills me. It's just... So Vesta chooses to do what many female celebrities choose to do. Very often, the reputation that a celebrity has in the public eye is way out of their hands. But they can choose to adapt their image to align with their reputation in order to seem more like they are in control of their image, and that in turn makes them more palatable to the public. This is where the idea of getting ahead of the rumors comes from. This kind of issue with celebrities' reputation is especially apparent with female celebrities, because again, their individuality is often invisible in face of what they represent to the public. I think this moment in the film is a reference to the kind of rebranding that Taylor Swift did with her album Reputation, or that Miley Cyrus did with Wrecking Ball. Immediately after this rebranding, we get a bunch of different headlines. The first of which is teen pregnancy skyrocket. The idea here is that Vesta's virgin status used to inspire good behavior in her teenage fans, but her new reputation inspires worse behavior. Within the themes of Megalopolis, I'd say that this plays another part in Coppola's general thesis that old values are crumbling away and that the general populace is lashing out with radical new behaviors. Teen pregnancy is obviously not a great thing, though, and it could be argued that Coppola sees Vesta as responsible. But I think that the focus on Vesta's invisibility previous to this probably plays a part in how we're meant to interpret this scene. I think that the film recognizes that a lifetime of being seen as only a symbol for other people's ideals is probably very dehumanizing, and often results in that person wanting to assert their individuality by whatever means the culture allows them. In this case, in the crumbling Republic of New Rome, revolutionary ideas are celebrated. So Vesta decides to appeal to that new market. Now, we still haven't covered Julia, but that's because she's going to need her own video. Julia is her own totally fleshed out, interesting, flawed character. I love her. So I'll do that video in the future. Is Megalopolis misogynistic? Sometimes it definitely is. Other times, not really. Sometimes it's feminist, even. All in all, though, I don't want to, and I don't feel comfortable giving like a final answer on this. I would love to hear what everyone else thinks, what you guys think. I've just tried to lay out what I thought would be relevant to the conversation. But I am going to give a final argument on why I don't think that Megalopolis is that misogynistic. Most of the misogyny in Megalopolis exists only on its surface. But in order to really engage with Megalopolis and what it's trying to say in general, you have to analyze it. Megalopolis demands to be analyzed. You cannot engage with Megalopolis casually. You cannot engage with Megalopolis on a surface level. It doesn't work. More specifically, you have to analyze the female characters. I knew when I started this channel that I would need to make this video addressing the misogyny in Megalopolis early on, because it is impossible to go any deeper into any of the themes of Megalopolis without first addressing the way that it presents and treats its female characters. You cannot understand Caesar's obsession with Megalopolis unless you understand how he treated his wife. You cannot understand Cicero's arc without first understanding Teresa's goals. You can't understand the way that the Crassus bank maintains wealth without first understanding how New Rome subjugates its Vesta virgins. And you can't understand New Rome unless you research the way that ancient Rome treated its women. By design, Megalopolis requires that we engage and learn about all of these things relating to misogyny. And you cannot understand any part of Megalopolis's themes, contradictions, satire, commentary, or goals until you understand Wow Platinum, who will be the subject of my next video. So subscribe to see that. Bye.